Hello, welcome to Enlightning. Thank you so much for being here and giving us your time and attention today. Today I'm here with Leanne Lee. She's a developer advocate at Loft Labs, and she's going to teach me and us about DevSpace. Leanne, tell us about yourself.
Hey, what can I say about myself that you don't already know? um, Developer advocate, and chief karaoke officer, which is probably where most people know me from by now. Apart from that, I'm based in Amsterdam, have a husband, no kids, no dogs, no cats. I think that's about it.
That's amazing. I like what you don't have being part of who you are.
Yeah,
In this day and age, though, people do want to know about your
I,
dependents, like fur and human
exactly.
variety.
What do you have to pay for?
It's not my part of my personality, but I'll go ahead and tell you what I don't have. Um, we have a lot of wonderful friends in chat already. Lisa's here.
Yes.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for
Hi,
coming.
Lisa.
Engin's here. Hello, hello.
Engen. Good to see you again.
And Russell's here. Hi, Russell. Thanks for coming.
Hey,
Happy
Russ, thanks for being
Friday.
here.
TGIF, am I right?
Yeah, it's 4 p.m. here, so this is the last thing that I'm doing today.
Good for you.
Yeah,
So,
great.
so you are chief karaoke officer and
Mm-hmm.
live in Amsterdam. So you must
Mm-hmm.
be so psyched for KubeCon,
I'm
right?
over the moon. Yes,
Yeah.
I hope everyone else is too. Yes, I've been already writing. I'm writing on a blog post about like all the things that I recommend doing and also not
Nice.
recommend doing. Um,
Just like the things, the fur babies you don't have. I like that.
exactly. You
Yeah.
just like set the boundaries.
Uh-huh.
And I've been also like visiting some cool places, took some like video shots, and yeah, just
Oh.
gonna some just
You're
all to get everyone hyped.
you're like physically scouting places for
I
people when they come.
am.
That's
I
really
am.
thoughtful. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll be looking closely at your guide.
Yeah. I
I
hope you will share it
That's
right and far.
very thoughtful. And I hear you're planning a Kubernetes KubeCon event. Is that true?
I am. So let me just
Yeah.
show you this amazing sticker that arrived today. So
Woo!
yes, if you don't know, I'm starting, or I have started this thing called Kuberoki, which is the first and only Kubernetes karaoke community. And yeah, we're gonna have a party. We're gonna have a huge one. I mean, it's a karaoke bar, so it's not super huge. We're not gonna fit like 1,000 people in it,
Uh-huh.
but I think it's gonna be super fun. It's gonna be on the Wednesday, where I've
Okay.
already seen that Devo team is like throwing like a beach party or something. So sorry, Devo team. I'm sorry for taking all your attendees.
Is it warm
Yeah,
enough for a beach party? I'm down. I'm your karaoke
I
girl.
think yeah. First of all, that much more
Yeah.
fun than a beach party in April in Amsterdam.
Uh-huh.
But thanks or not thanks to global warming, it is actually probably going to be quite sunny. I just read an article yesterday that the spring has been getting sunnier and like the temperature has been rising by 2 degrees, which is not great because I don't know if you know, but the Netherlands, Nederland means lowlands, and that's because we're
Uh-huh.
below sea level. So the
Oh.
country
Mm.
has to put a lot of money and effort into, like damming and, making sure that we don't sink. So
Okay.
yeah, I think out of like the developed industrial nations, the Netherlands will
Mm-hmm.
probably be one of the first countries to really feel the effects of global warming, as we are already
Uh,
doing right now. So
yeah.
sorry for the downer, but you can still come and sing
Yeah.
karaoke, just don't go to the beach party.
Or go to the beach while it's still there.
While it's still there,
There's a
exactly.
scarcity mentality around the beach
Well,
right
it's
now.
beach soon. So.
And yeah, maybe just so there's room enough for me to sing a few songs, I'll just promote the beach party so that
I will. You send me your list. I will reserve a spot for you. But I'm just gonna say that this karaoke bar is the place that I've been going to since I first moved about 5 years
Uh-huh.
ago. Been going there pretty much every Friday, and
Oh.
it's. I love community, and it's just a nice community. It's like always the regulars, and you hang out and you chat and you get to know each other. I mean, we don't know each other's names really. We just, oh, it's you again. Oh, let's sing our song again. And that's
Yeah,
what
I
I
like the
just
songs
love
you
about it.
choose.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
totally.
Just
Uh-huh.
love that. So yeah,
Develop, yeah.
I'm gonna have a great time.
Oh, developer guys here. Hello, wishing us a very great show. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming,
you.
friends. Will you be at KubeCon, or all y'all in chat be at KubeCon? Let's meet in real life. I
Yes.
yeah, for huggers, I'm a hugger. So if anyone wants a hug, there, I offer you now. But also, if you don't want to hug, that's okay. I respect your boundaries.
Yes.
I'm going to start moving behind the light board. I'm
Hmm.
going to put some DevSpace docs into the, and it says yes, they'll be at
Of
KubeCon.
course, I'm
Yay,
holding
yay,
some
yay.
shirts for him.
Ah, I like to put stickers on my journal, so I really want a Kuberoki
Yes,
sticker.
I will hold some for you as well.
If I didn't know it was microphones, I would think at first it was ice cream cones. Maybe just from you holding it up. I
Let me
bet,
just do it again.
yeah,
I guess,
yeah.
yeah, I see it. I see it now. Oh, great. Great. Yeah, too late now. Too late
So,
now.
you give me a global warming downer. I'm handing you back. So those of you in chat, I would love to hear. So we're talking today about DevSpace, which is a tool for developing your application, your Kubernetes native application in an efficient way. And so how are y'all currently developing your Kubernetes applications? What's your process? Are you building container images yourself? Are you using a certain tech? What are your pain points? What's easy and good? Tell us about your life and what you're doing. Just in general. If you just want
Yeah. What, do
to
you have kids or cats or dogs? I mean, are you interested in that?
Yeah, we want to hear about yours. Um, and Leanne, one thing we were talking about pre-show that I think would be a great thing to talk about now is like what qualities make a good engineer. Maybe they're not
Hmm.
always what you think. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for that question, Whitney, that we totally did not prepare for. Yeah, the reason why I've been thinking about this a lot is like recently, for some reason, I've been seeing like on Twitter, and like Twitter is probably a bad example because it's always kind of weird, but I've been seeing a lot of talk about people really valuing technical knowledge and technical capabilities really highly, and expressing kind of their opinions in a not very constructive way. Maybe there's really like there was a thing about I don't think that's real, but there was a thing on Reddit where a guy was like, "Oh, I'm a web developer, and my 9-year-old daughter now wants to learn how to code." And
Mm-hmm.
she asked him to help, but he didn't help, and then she like taught herself C++, which is pretty amazing, and gave him like shown him the code, and he's just like tore into her like, this is not production ready, the naming is bad and everything. And I mean, aside from the fact that like, why would you abuse your 9-year-old daughter like that,
Yeah.
I think it speaks to like a bigger thing of like these old school rockstar engineers who are just like technical knowledge is everything to them, and they feel because they're very good at this one thing that gives them the right to just be completely obnoxious and kind of like unbearable in other ways. And yesterday I saw an article, and I didn't read the article, I just saw the headline, but it was saying something like ChatGPT will kill the rockstar developer or something like that. And I was thinking about that, and I guess there's something to it that I want to talk about now, which is that I don't know if you've tried GitHub Copilot yet, or tried using ChatGPT to write code for you. It works amazingly well. It works really, really well, which is kind of shocking maybe. But that means that, all this technical knowledge is not that valuable anymore because I can just like ask
Oh.
AI to do that for me. So I think ChatGPT is not always correct. That's right, Lisa. So you also need to check the code. Same thing with Copilot, by the way. Like
Leanne,
sometimes
I'm gonna
yeah.
I have to restart my browser, so I'm gonna
Okay.
drop and be right back. Okay.
Okay, I'll just monologue in the
Yes,
meantime.
thank you.
No worries. So so for one thing, AI is not always correct, and it's also especially not correct on like the entirety of the context where it operates in, right? Because unless you tell AI, oh, remember that there are people who, I don't know, can't see, for example, the AI won't factor that into the solution finding process. So long story short, what I think will be more important as developers, engineers, or product managers, like people who work on technology, is to understand everything besides, the pure tech, the pure technological stuff. So stuff like empathy, communication skills, understanding people's needs will, I think, become more important for you as a person looking for employment, really. So I think that, with the kind of like talk about platform engineering, for example, that, a lot of companies talking about platform right now. And a big aspect of that is productizing the platform. So if you think about, where maybe systems administration has come from, and it's more about, minutely optimizing computer stuff. And now platform engineering is really more about how do I make all of these abstraction layers that Kubernetes gives us, and it's amazing, how do I make them useful for people, for developers, for people who don't have the time or the need, or really like, why would I ask a front-end engineer to really go deep into resource quotas? It just makes no sense. It seems like a waste of everyone's time and effort. So understanding people's needs and understanding how to talk to them and how to get like to the truth of it. I used to be a consultant, and we would go into companies and build CI/CD platforms for them, for example, or build like CI/CD pipelines. And a lot of times, those people were just not really honest with us with their needs, because they were afraid of looking like, they're incompetent, or, just, kind of like just didn't want to look like they're idiots or something. So they were just telling us like stuff that was not in fact true. And then we built this thing, and they just never used it because they were actually not super confident in CI/CD or microservices. So to wrap this up, maybe, I don't know if Whitney's back. Just hone your social skills, hone your human skills, be curious instead of judgmental. I think that's always something that bugged me a lot, was when we had a disagreement and people would just say no. Someone was suggesting something and someone else was just saying no. Like it's an easy thing to just ask, why do you think this? Like what makes you come to this conclusion? Understanding other people's perspectives, and then you don't have to accept that. It's the same with feedback. You don't, just because someone says something to you doesn't mean that this is the truth, but you can use that information, incorporate it into your own paradigm, into your own truth, and then probably be better because of it, because now you know more, you have more information, and you can like base your opinions and your worldview on more facts and knowledge. So I'm sorry, Lisa, I'm just going to read what you wrote. A dev-friendly platform engineer walks into a bar ruminating on the question, how do we make the infrastructure work better for devs rather than creating something that's really cool for us to use? I had asked AI this question. What did AI say? I'm really interested now. Because how do we make the infrastructure work better for devs rather than creating something that's really cool for us? I think that is such a good point. This is something that a lot of engineers, I think, are kind of maybe struggling with. And I understand that as well, like this shiny new object syndrome or whatever it's called. I have that too. Obviously, I think most people have it. It's just like how our brains are wired at this point. It's just like, oh, give me a new release. And that's great, but you really need to differentiate between, I'm doing this for myself and for me and to learn things and to play with stuff and, make myself happy, and doing something for other people. If you can differentiate between production code and POCs or spikes, then I'm sure you can differentiate between, I'm using this technology because I'm interested and I want to try it, and I'm using this technology because it's more useful to the people that I'm actually trying to help. Give another example where we were building this platform for this one customer, and we were discussing like writing operators. And then obviously probably the first choice for most people who write operators, the language choice is Go, which makes a lot of sense. Kubernetes is written in Go, and it seems to be the language that is most appropriate for that particular use case. However, all the engineers in the company were Java engineers, Java and front end. So even though we as consultants, we would have really loved to write them in Go. I wanted to learn Go at that time, so that would have been super fun. But in the end, we have to at some point leave and then hand over everything to those engineers. Yay. And so we just needed to find something that they can use instead of something that we wanted to use. So I'm just going to read what Lisa's writing here. So this is the answer to the question that Lisa asked AI. The engineer orders a drink and strikes up a conversation with the bartender about the latest developments in software engineering. Oh, thanks. They talk about the challenges of creating developer-friendly platforms, and the engineer shares some of their own strategies for improving the developer experience. As this conversation continues, they both agree that a focus on collaboration, communication, and empathy is essential for building great software and supporting the developers who create it. The engineer finishes the drink, thanks the bartender for the conversation, and heads out, already thinking about how they can apply some of the insights from the discussion to their work. This is the one time where I would say AI is not lying. That is really great. Thanks for sharing, Lisa.
Thanks for your patience while
thanks for letting me ramble.
I guess it worked out. It looks like it's been a great conversation. What's the TLDR of what I missed?
Just talk to people and don't be judgmental, to give people the space to really express their need. One of the most important things is building trust. Trust will just get you anywhere, and people will tell you the truth, right?
If you give them space to do it, and
you give them the space, and if you prove that you're a trustworthy person, that you won't be judging them, that you won't tattle on them, that is not just at work, just everywhere. If you're able to unlock that in people, that they trust you, it's a superpower.
I don't like what I find when I think about myself and how I act is I tend to establish that trust by being the one who's vulnerable first. So I'll be quick to say oh, I didn't know what that acronym meant, even though it's really obvious, a really prevalent one. And then it helps people feel safe to be their true selves around me.
Yeah, you're setting the tone of the how this meeting or whatever is going to be like. And for every question, for every stupid question that someone asks, there's a bunch of people who also had the same question, but didn't dare to ask, right? So yeah, 100%. Always ask questions. And, if someone judges you for asking a question, I mean,
F them.
At least you know the answer now.
Yeah, and also who cares what they think?
Unless it's your manager.
But
then maybe go somewhere else.
If they're judging you that hard, they're probably judging themselves just as hard, if not worse. It's almost
That's the other thing, right? People who are like that are probably very unhappy themselves, so you don't have to think about it twice.
Yeah. So let's dig into the techno. Oh, Phi-Spheric's here. Hi, Phi-Spheric. The AI bartender replied, "Was that with or without the lemon slice then?"
Sir, this is a Wendy's.
All right. So those of you who watch the show regularly know I love to start this section with asking, what was the world like before your technology existed? So that caused it to need to get made. So what problems existed for DevSpace?
So imagine this. We're in the year, 2019, maybe 2020. Let's say 2020, we just had our first lockdown. I don't even know if DevSpace already existed 2020. It might have.
In the States, at least, the lockdown started 2 years ago or 3 years ago, 2020.
3 years ago. 3 years ago. It was 2020. It's 2023 now.
Yeah.
Picture I don't know, in a brief time window between Kubernetes first hit the stage and before DevSpace, right? Let's say 2018 or something. So you have your application, and maybe you've already been using Docker, and maybe you've already been using Docker Compose or something like that to manage your containers on your container lifecycle. But one of the things that's super annoying is that every time you make a change in your code and you want to see how it's going to look, you have to rebuild the entire container and then deploy it in your environment manually, probably because you don't have something for that, or maybe you have written a make file for that. And it's just, but you have to do it all manually, and it's a bit annoying, at least to get started. So, but then you have your perfect setup. It's amazing. And now you change employers maybe, or you get a new laptop, and then you have to do everything again. Now you have an M1, so it's like different chip architecture. Now you have to like do completely new things, and just like always remember, oh, I have to like type this command, and then I have to type this command. Now you're gonna, maybe one day you get a new colleague, and they're asking you like, hey, I'm trying to locally develop this. How can I do it? And then you have to walk them through like all of your 25 steps of how to set up your local development environment. So these are all things that I personally found really, really annoying before I discovered tools like DevSpace. And yeah, I think that's the quick one. Russ, if you have anything more, feel free to like, that's now I'm putting this on you. But yeah, I think that's a good start, because it's really annoying.
Yeah. So developers, before DevSpace, developers had to build their container, push their container to an environment to be able to see any code changes that they're doing. And there are maybe some ways to make that feedback loop faster than doing that whole bit manually, but even that involves a lot of setup. And if anything changes, like you have to change your setup. A lot of work. Yeah.
And this is all even without running Kubernetes on your local machine, right? This was like before Minikube. So then now in comes like Minikube or Docker and Kubernetes and Docker or something like that. And now like, okay, now you have a Kubernetes cluster, which does make some things easier because it's always Kubernetes, right? But it's still like, you still have to set it all up manually. And then maybe now you have Kubernetes, and then you're like, oh, I'm just going to use the manifest that we're using for production, for example. But then you're in your local machine, you don't have a Postgres database, or you don't have all these things. So now what do? You have to set them all up on your local machine, and now you're suddenly maintaining your entire production environment on your local machine. So yeah, that also pretty annoying.
So manual setup of dependencies. Is dependencies a good way to,
I think dependencies is the right word here, yeah.
Okay. So, for example, a database.
Yeah, I'm gonna just get rid of my. I'm getting a bit warm from the talking about how annoying the world was before this.
You're incensed. I'm gonna say hello. Thanks so much for coming. I appreciate you.
Hey.
Yay. All right. So I'm convinced we have problems here. They need solving.
Yes.
If you got a problem, I'll solve it. I'm getting ready for karaoke.
Oh yeah, that's good. Send me your list later.
So DevSpace was created.
DevSpace was created. And
is it a good? Yeah,
it's amazing.
Is it a good time to say like what DevSpace is? Like, give it a solid definition.
I don't know if there's like, again, Russ, if you have one sentence that you could explain it, I would say something. If people ask me that, I will usually say something like, it will manage your local development environment, or the lifecycle of your development environment, or it will manage the lifecycle of your applications, like the ones that you're working on.
The lifecycle, but it's for local development, right?
Yes. What I mean by lifecycle is just that it will manage kind of like, you start it up and then you shut it down, and it will make sure that everything that needs to be there is there, and then when you shut it down, it's like it's gone. That's kind of the idea of it. Actually, you know what? Okay. For me, it really helped to develop in the environment.
So Russ says, for me, it really helped to develop in the environments the app that would be deployed to. That makes sense. So you're developing your app in the environment where it's going to be deployed. You can absolutely start with Docker or Docker Compose, but there's a jump from that to Kubernetes. So DevSpace helps us start wherever you're going to end. That makes a lot of sense. So you're,
Russ, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you don't have to run it just on your local environment. Like, you could point DevSpace to any Kubernetes cluster that you have access to. So you could also manage like staging environments or test environments with DevSpace, which is pretty cool because then you can reuse the same setup across different environments. And then you could even reuse it for prod as well if you wanted to. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So DevSpace improves the developer experience. Is that good to put down?
Yes. That's
okay. We'll start there.
Yeah. Let's start there and work our way down.
Okay. And then, do you want to by doing what? What's the end of the second half of that sentence?
Do we want to do like high level, like by making it easier to? Now I'm thinking. Would you want a more technical definition or a more like sales and marketing kind of definition?
Yeah, why don't you give us both and we can discuss it in chat.
Okay. So on a higher level, I guess this is also what we already had in the title card, by making by making Kubernetes invisible to the developer. How about that?
Ooh, that's nice. Yeah. Okay. And then we'll talk about how that's done throughout the episode. Yes. Okay.
So Russ is saying, yep, if you have a staging or production cluster, you can use it there or start locally with Minikube or Kind. And I'm guessing you could use other Kubernetes distros as well if you wanted to, but these are the two main ones. I mean, as long as you have a kubeconfig, you should be able to use DevSpace, because I believe we just look into the current kubeconfig context and then just use that cluster to do stuff on it.
So to use DevSpace, you need a kubeconfig.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're, and that's, are there going to be a few things, or is that just the answer? A kubeconfig?
Yeah, I mean, we can. No, let's start the list.
Okay.
So obviously you need a Kubernetes cluster that's given. If you have a kubeconfig, you probably have a Kubernetes cluster that config points to.
Okay, let's start with Kubernetes cluster. Okay, and this could be what you were saying earlier. This could be dev, prod, staging, local. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. Okay.
Yeah. You do need to have, obviously, the rights to do things like deploy. That is probably, as I said, we look into the kubeconfig. So if the authentication authorization that you have in the kubeconfig or the kubeconfig points to is the correct one, then you can do whatever you want. But on most production clusters, it might be.
Let's take a quick step backwards. If I'm a developer and I want to ignore Kubernetes, I likely don't know what a kubeconfig file is.
That's a very good point.
So let's define a kubeconfig file. Yeah.
So a kubeconfig file is I believe a YAML or something like a YAML that lives on your local machine, and it has a bunch of information about a server address where you can find a Kubernetes cluster, and then certs like keys and stuff with which you can authenticate at that cluster. Mm-hmm. And those keys are tied to a specific user that on the cluster will have specific rights.
Authenticates. Cool.
Yes.
And then I'll just put etc.
Yeah.
So it points at a Kubernetes cluster and authenticates you to that cluster. Yeah. That's what a kubeconfig file does. Cool.
Right. So if you are a developer who just really doesn't care about any of this, but you need to develop for Kubernetes, you know that your application has to be on Kubernetes in the end. So you want to develop locally already, kind of in a way that you know will work. You will probably use something like Docker and then Docker Desktop or something like that. And Docker comes with Kubernetes. You can enable Kubernetes in your Docker UI. And then that will all be taken care of you. And it's just a click thing. Like you just click on
Are we talking about DevSpace right now, or are we talking about Docker?
No, I'm still talking about Kubernetes. I'm just explaining, like, if you are a developer who has never touched Kubernetes, then
okay, got you.
Then you can get it through Docker, and then you don't have to look at the config file because that's all been hidden away from you.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, just maybe I was taking too many steps back right now.
That's okay.
Okay, so the next thing that you will need is the DevSpace CLI, which you can get from the website, for example, DevSpace SH. And you can get it from all the known package managers like Homebrew or I don't even remember any. I've been on Mac for so long.
apt-get, Choco.
Apt, yeah. Sometimes, yeah. You know the ones that you use. So yeah, the DevSpace CLI will do most of the stuff that's going on that you will do later, and that exclusively runs on your local machine or wherever you type DevSpace CLI. Oh, my camera went off. I don't know why.
What happened? The technical.
You can still hear me though, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's like an old school broadcast. It's like giving me memories, these colors.
I know. Okay, wait.
Yeah.
Let me, here we are. I don't know what happened. So where were we? Oh yeah, DevSpace CLI.
Yeah.
So nothing is actually installed on the Kubernetes cluster or anything like that to run DevSpace.
Interesting.
Right? So you don't have to have access to the cluster just to run DevSpace. But yeah, you will later want to deploy stuff to the cluster maybe, and then that will be deployed to the cluster. But DevSpace itself, only local.
Interesting. Cool.
And yeah, probably the one thing that's missing is you need an application of some sort that you want to work on. So that is the last thing. I don't know if that's part of the list that you're making there, but
why not?
Yeah. Okay.
And then we will likely get to this, but we talked about an application that needs a database. Is it my responsibility to install that database and get it all set up through DevSpace too? Like, how's that play in?
Ideally, no. Practically, probably also no. If you're on your local machine, then maybe yes, because you won't be able to, unless you set it up in that way, you won't be able to call out to somewhere else, unless you set it up in your local cluster that you are allowed to call to whatever database that lives somewhere else, right? So if you have your local cluster and you have your local applications running there, but the database lives somewhere else, you need to kind of like make it happen that you can talk to that database.
Okay.
If you have a shared application, and we're going to get to that later, if you have a shared environment where many teams, work on stuff at the same time, then you could set it up in a way that you're not responsible for the database, because the database just lives there, and DevSpace will be able to find the database and will know, oh, this is the database that I need. But we will get to that.
Okay. So to answer, so what I'm understanding is, if there's a Kubernetes cluster that's running on Google Cloud or something, and it has a local database running, it maybe has another application that my application needs to call is maybe running. That's all out there, and I can call it and use it and access it without like any special configurations.
So, okay, I think maybe I'm trying to explain it the wrong way around. So if you are developing on your local machine, right? You have your local Kubernetes cluster, Docker, whatever, and you only want to run the application that you're currently working on, but that application has dependencies to a database or other applications that are not running on your local machine. Then you have to somehow be able to tell your application locally, this database is somewhere else. And maybe like create some configuration that makes it possible for you to, from your local machine, call the remote database. So it's possible, but it's not out of the box. You have to do that yourself. If, however, go ahead.
I'm adding to the list that you need to connect to application dependencies. Is that correct?
If they're separate. So
yes.
I don't know what's going on with my camera today. Okay, I'm gonna switch cameras now.
Okay.
I'm gonna switch to the amateur camera. Okay. So there's another type of usage. So this is one type of usage where I just run my local cluster with just the app that I'm working on right now, and that's all there is on my cluster. The other type of usage is where we are multiple teams and we share a cluster. Let's say we share an integration cluster, a staging cluster, and we're working on it, and my application has a dependency to your application. In my DevSpace configuration, I'm saying that I'm working on this application, on mine, but it has a dependency to yours. And in your DevSpace YAML, it says the same thing, but vice versa. So now you can deploy your application completely independently, and DevSpace will be able to see your application because we're on the same cluster, and we'll say, oh, this is the dependency that I need. So I don't have to spin it up. But if you are defining it, if you're defining the dependency and you're on your local cluster and it's not there, then DevSpace will spin it up for you. So dependency will be something like, this is the repo address, and then DevSpace will go and get it for you, unless you are able to set it up in a way that DevSpace can call it from somewhere else, where I don't know if that's possible. So Russ will have to jump into that. Does that make any sense? I'm feeling like I'm rambling again.
You're great. I'm still slowly but surely wrapping my head around it.
Okay.
So when you're developing your application with DevSpace, are you always on a local cluster that's then connected maybe to a Google Cloud cluster, or?
No, that's not how it usually works. So usually
think
DevSpace works in a way where you usually are only talking to, okay, now I'm seeing where it's confusing.
Okay.
When I said you need to configure so you can go to this other database or whatever, this is probably almost more an application level thing where your application just has the address of the database and you just change the address. So instead of local.dev, it would be gcp.io or something. So it's, I mean, you can put it somewhere else, but it's kind of like more an application level configuration rather than like a Kubernetes level configuration or something like that. So I said at the beginning, DevSpace should make life easier, and I feel like I've not been holding up that promise. But you know what? We get to the details, and then it will hopefully become much clearer.
Yeah, and I think we're talking about two different use cases that I'm kind of getting confused with each other, where like there's a local cluster and there's a remote shared cluster. Those are two totally different things, and I'm conflating them.
So let me just let's just ignore what I said and just go to you have a local cluster, you have your application, you have dependency applications. Out of the box, DevSpace will check your cluster and see the app that you depend on, it doesn't exist on this cluster, so I'm just going to spin it up. I'm going to pull the repository, and then I'm going to run this application because I'm expecting that there's going to be a Kubernetes YAML or something.
Okay. You have local cluster. You're running your app on that local cluster.
Yeah. So you have your local cluster. You run your app
or develop
that you're working on.
Yeah.
Oh no, I think it's your connection is a little bit. No, we're good. Back.
Okay. You have a local cluster. You develop your app there. You
spin up the dependencies on your local cluster. Or DevSpace will do that for you.
And then it's also somehow avoiding the problem of having to rebuild your container image when you make changes.
That's the next thing.
Okay. So it spins up a new copy.
Yeah. Well, it's not it spins up the dependencies.
Okay.
I don't even know if it doesn't need to be a copy. It just spins up the dependencies because it doesn't exist on your cluster currently.
Yeah. Cool. I follow.
Okay. And then before we get to the hot reloading, the use case number 2 would be you have a shared cluster.
Okay.
You have a shared cluster. You still develop your app there. And then your teammate who you depend on, who's working on the application that your application depends on, also develops their app there.
Okay.
And now DevSpace sees this app is already here, so I don't have to spin it up now. Right? It will just use the version that your teammate is running or working on, and then use that as your dependency. Which can be very useful if you're doing CI/CD, for example, and your teammate is working on something that might be breaking the API or something like that, but it's not live yet, so you don't have the production version. But while they're developing on that shared cluster, you already get all the updates for your application. So you can already develop against kind of this new version of the dependency while it's not in production yet. And you don't have to maintain that dependency, right? That's what your teammate is doing. You just see that, oh, their current version on this shared cluster now has this little change, so I can adapt to that little change. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense, but I can see it being good or bad. Like,
yes,
great,
100%.
You get a very fresh copy, but also like maybe they're making changes that they're not sure about yet, and you're already having like, and then they want to revert, and you've already
100%. But I think maybe if you're in the midst of really developing that feature, I don't know, maybe that's not super great, but I've definitely seen that you need to at some point integrate your changes together. Like you need to have this version of this app and this version of this app, and you need to make sure that they will work well together. And one of the ways that a lot of companies get around that is they just don't do CI/CD. They just develop and they just deploy in bundles, right? They will just bundle up the versions. And this is like one way that you could not do that, do proper CI/CD, but still make sure that you don't introduce any breaking changes in your APIs.
So you get freshest copy.
Yeah.
Of dependency app.
And I'm gonna check this in the docs if there's a way to say I don't want that, because I could imagine that this is a use case that not everyone's super happy with.
Yeah, I'm writing for better or worse, but
yeah, you could say.
But
you could say ignore dependencies. You could set like an ignore dependencies property. Russ, please tell me if it's something that it actually will it just completely ignore the dependency and not spin it up at all, or will it just not use the dependency that already lives on the cluster? Because it says ignore dependencies defines if dependencies of the dependency should be excluded. That Okay, we'll find out. I guess it means the dependencies of the dependency.
So there's some sort of configuration DevSpace file that is defining your entire environment, like your application and then all the dependencies it needs. Yeah. And so if you have it locally, so I guess that maybe should be in what you need. Like, how are you telling DevSpace about the dependencies?
Yeah, let's talk about maybe the DevSpace YAML. I think this is now a great time to do it, and that's the core, the heart of how DevSpace works for you, I guess.
Okay.
So, it's a YAML. I think most people know what a YAML looks like by now. And on the root level, we have properties like, for example, dependencies. Let me just see if I can find one. I don't have one here, but anyhow, so on the root level of the YAML, you can define dependencies, and then you can just like the next level of the YAML would be the name of your dependencies. So you would have dependencies and then database, for example. Now, this database, we can now say you can find all the information about this database dependency, either where we are right now, so you can just hand it a path, and I think it's a relative path. So if you basically have the dependency within your folder, then you can do that. You could also say this is somewhere on a Git repository, and then you have to pass in your the address and the branch. And you can also do like tags or subpaths, and there's all kinds of like fancy stuff here. Just checking. Yeah, so tag, revision, subpath, branch. You can disable pull and disable shadow. But so basically, you can give it either a path or a Git URL. And then DevSpace will, check the YAML, and we'll basically check the state of the YAML with the state of the cluster and just make sure to reconcile them. And then if it sees that this dependency does not exist on my cluster, I will try to spin it up. Okay, I think Russ has replied. You can pick and choose. You might ignore dependencies if someone else is actively developing another microservice and you just want to reference their copy. Okay. That's great.
Okay. Config. So what I'm writing down, what you're saying, kind of simplifying and paraphrasing.
Well, declare your dependencies, declare your cluster. Oh, okay, sorry. No, that's all right. But the cluster you don't declare in the DevSpace YAML. So the cluster we will just assume from reading your kubeconfig, and you don't have to put that in the DevSpace YAML.
Okay. So you declare in your DevSpace YAML, you say this is my application, and this is where my application location is.
Well, in the DevSpace YAML, you don't actually only declare your applications, you declare the state of your development environment. And you could be working on multiple applications also, right? It's more about you just define kind of, this is the state in which I want my Kubernetes, my target cluster to be in eventually.
So when you were describing before the 25 steps you might have to take to get your development environment, that's an imperative way to do what is now happening declaratively with this DevSpace
I should
YAML.
have led with that. That's a very good way to express that. Thank you.
Thank you for helping me understand.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of saying, do this, do this, do this, you're saying, I don't care how you do it. This is what I want in the end. That's the whole idea of it.
Declaratively.
Yeah.
Cool. And then devm is.
So dependencies are one of the things that you can define for your local environment. Another thing that is the most important probably are deployments. So in those deployments, you would declare your app. So you basically have deployments, and then you just have a bunch of whatever you want to deploy to your cluster that is not a dependency. So all the deployments are things that you actually want to touch. That's the stuff that you actually are working on. Whereas dependencies is stuff that you need it, but you don't want to work on it, for example.
So you're actually using Kubernetes objects in your DevSpace YAML? You're deploying you're referencing a Kubernetes development?
No,
deployment?
I think deployments is not a Kubernetes deployment. I think it's just a DevSpace way to say, please deploy this, because you can define whether you deploying it from a Helm chart or just want to do like run a kubectl. So I could, for example, deploy a cron job. Right? It's just saying like run this, apply this kubectl. Apply this manifest. Apply this Kubernetes manifest with kubectl. or kubectl or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And it could theoretically be whatever Kubernetes object. It doesn't have to be a deployment. It doesn't have to be a pod. It could be a cron job or a service or whatever.
So when you declare your application, it sounds like you were saying you're pointing at like a Git repo. You're not doing it from an image. Is that true?
Or like you would probably do like a Helm chart or just a plain Kubernetes manifest. Those are the two types that we do.
So it is packaged up into an image.
And then yes, so you can well, most people probably will. Okay. It's really hard to explain it without showing the YAML because it would be so much easier.
That's half of the fun of the show.
Okay. So, all right.
It's like Pictionary.
The hierarchy of that YAML is deployments, right? This is like just telling DevSpace, these are the things that I need you to put on the cluster and manage for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next level is the name. So it would be maybe app, whatever you want to call it, or my super great app. And then the next level is what kind of, are you deploying it from a Helm chart or are you deploying it from a plain Kubernetes manifest?
Mm-hmm.
Then let's say we're using Helm charts. The next level would be, give me the name of the chart, give me the address, where can I find the chart?
Mm-hmm.
And then pass in the values for the Helm chart, and that could be whatever. It could be you're referencing an image that is already built somewhere, for example.
Mm-hmm.
This image could be remote. It could also be in your local image registry.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's another root level declaration for the DevSpace YAML that is called images. And there you can define how to build images locally. And then you can reference that in your deployments. But you don't have to. Like, you can use images that have already been pre-built somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also build images. And so basically that hierarchy would be images, and then you give it the name, that how you want to call the image, and then where can I find the Docker file? And that can be, locally or relative to well, it always has to be locally. It can be just Docker file, how most people name it, and then I don't think you even have to pass a name in. Or it can be somewhere relative to where you are. So you could have, I've seen people do it. You can have like 3 different microservices in one folder, all managed by the same DevSpace YAML, or you can have a DevSpace YAML for each of your microservices, and they're each separate in separate repositories. So you can declare the image build, you can declare the applications or the deployments.
Mm-hmm.
You can so this is kind of like the bare level stuff, right? You have to probably build an image, and then you have to deploy it somehow in your cluster. Now, most people, when they develop stuff, they need more stuff. So this would work on production, for example, right? You could just say like build image, put it on cluster, and this would work fine. But then if you're developing, you might need stuff like port forward, because you want to like go into your container and check things out to debug stuff. And for that, there is a section that's called dev. And basically, when you run DevSpace, you can tell DevSpace, hey, this is not a production environment, this is a development environment, and I want all the fancy stuff that I can get in development environments. And there's a bunch of stuff there. For example, the not rebuilding your image. So if you tell DevSpace, this is a development environment, what it will do is it will, if you tell it to, it will mount your file, or the files that you define, directly into the container. So every time you change those files, the changes are directly mounted, and you don't have to rebuild the entire container. That's the idea behind the hot reloading. So you don't have to wait for the container to be rebuilt and redeployed because it's still the same container. And then you can even do fancy stuff like you don't even use the production container. You use a specific dev container that has a bunch of dev tools on it that you wouldn't want on production because it might be unsafe or something. So you can also say like, hey, if I'm in a development environment, use this other container or this other base image and, install or like mount my file system in there. So just put my application source into the container and that's it. So now you can define a different way to build your image for dev or prod in the same DevSpace YAML. Okay,
Cool.
let's walk it 10 steps back so you can write something down.
So different strategies for dev versus prod, for example.
Yeah.
But I want to capture what hot reloading is, and so and I think it's important
for sure. Yeah.
I think it's important, that you don't have to rebuild your container image to see your changes in the cluster, and they can still interact with the other Kubernetes services.
Yeah.
So different strategies for dev versus prod, for example. Am I still on the board? Good.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you think? And then there's other stuff you said. Lots of other bells and whistles.
A bunch of other stuff, like for example, port forwarding. You can start a terminal, like an SSH server and a terminal inside the container. So DevSpace will, after you tell it, do the thing, it will automatically put you into the container and you can immediately do stuff with it. And this is all stuff that you wouldn't want in production, obviously. So that's why there's like a separate dev section where you can say, these are the cool things I want for dev. Don't put them in production or don't put them in anything that's not dev. So in the CLI, you basically just say DevSpace dev, and then it will do all the regular stuff and all the dev stuff for you.
Okay. So the DevSpace YAML, you declare your application, and it can be multiple applications, and you can do it via Helm chart or vanilla Kubernetes manifest. You declare your dependencies in those locations. You declare the entire state of your development environment. You can optionally declare an image build strategy if you want to point to code, and it can do the building part for you. But the hot reloading is what we want to. It's the sexy feature.
Yeah.
It's hot in a sexy way.
Exactly.
Damn, that reloading's hot. Yeah. So that's a way to see your changes as you're developing without having to rebuild the container.
Exactly.
But that hot reloading or port forward or SSH into container are bells and whistles that you'd only want to use if you were in development. So you can, in the same YAML, declare, if we're going to prod, it looks like this. We disable all these features. If it goes to development, we go like this.
100%. Yeah. And then ideally, you can just, if you have a new colleague, you just give them the DevSpace YAML, which is probably already in the repository, and they can just run it, and then it will work, hopefully, perfectly on their local machine without, like all the, what I said, that you have to go through all the, and then you have to do this here and that there. They don't have to do it. They don't have to understand it. It's defined, it's declared in the DevSpace YAML. So it will hopefully just work out of the box for them. And then if you're looking in the docs, I don't know if we call it hot reloading. It's called file sync.
Okay.
So yeah, just if you're looking and you can't find it, it's called file sync.
Because what is a tech feature without two names at least?
Well, I mean, hot reloading is the marketing term probably, and file sync is what we actually do. Oh, then one of my favorite features is also, you can also say in dev that please open this URL for me when you're done with everything. So if you have like a web server, it will just automatically do everything for you and open the browser for you, and then you can just go and like make a coffee and come back, and then everything's there.
Nice. Love it. Okay, so hot reloading, aka file sync.
And then
Sexy.
there's also I
Wait,
wanna yeah, cool.
I
Yes.
want to talk about what it is
All
before
right.
we talk about the
Oh
next
yeah,
thing.
of
Yeah,
course.
you
Okay.
spell it out. I know you said it once, but I was thinking about other things, and now I'm ready
Yeah,
for my full attention.
that's all right. Okay, so the way that it does, and file sync is the better name for this, is that your source code,
Mm-hmm.
usually you will probably build it in some way, but when you're doing the hot reloading stuff, you just put the source code directly into the container. You mount it in there. So actually you don't copy it in there. You basically just have a reference to your actual host file system. So in the container, you're saying, there's some files here that are not actually here. I'm just referencing, and they actually live on my host machine. Mounted into the container. Yeah.
So they're referenced there. They're not actually there.
They're mounted. They're mounted. I'm just using the word reference. Yeah. They're not really copied into the container. They're just
Okay.
It's just I think it's a pointer. I don't know. I don't really understand that much about containers, I have to say, but from the way that I explain it to myself is that not actually there. It's just a pointer to my actual host file system.
Okay.
So now when I make a change there and I save it, DevSpace will see, oh, you just made a change, and then it will sync the changes into the container or like mount them. Honestly, I'm kind of like I'm just going to check just to be sure. Oh wait, it doesn't have to. What it does is it will I think we only need to there's some fancy stuff that we can do when DevSpace detects changes. But then DevSpace doesn't have to detect them because the files are mounted anyway, so the changes should just like automatically, I guess, make their way into the container without DevSpace having to do anything. But you could do stuff like, restart this process or something if you see a file change. So for example, if you're working on, let's say, a Python web server, and then you make changes, then it's still the same process, so the changes won't show up. So you have to restart the process so the changes actually will show up on your website, for example. So in that case, you have to tell DevSpace to start the container on file change. But it's not the file change that DevSpace needs to manage, it's the container lifecycle, the container restart or the thread restart inside the container.
Okay, so the application process needs to get restarted inside the container.
Yeah.
And DevSpace manages that.
DevSpace can manage that for you, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then I think the main thing is really just that you don't need to rebuild the image, you don't need to redeploy to Kubernetes. All of this stuff is just taken care of you, and you can just it should feel like you're just working on your host machine. Like you don't even realize there's like a Kubernetes cluster behind it, because everything will just automatically appear in front of your eyes, and you don't have to think about it.
Automatically happens. Devs don't have to understand.
But of course, if you're very interested, you can definitely dig into. I mean, it's a YAML, so everything should ideally be clear what's happening.
So the application source codes I have a question that's probably a dumb question, as they say, that's going to show my greenness, but I feel comfortable with that. And that question is, if this cluster is running on, say, Google Cloud, and my code is local and being saved locally, is that a slow process at all? Does it matter that the computer I'm saving to and the computer that's hosting the container are very far apart from each other geographically?
That is a very good question. I don't actually know that.
I'm guessing not, just because I know where a close Uber is or whatever. Like that happens really fast. Yeah. So that's just a question. So when the changes when I'm a developer, when I save my changes, they're automatically reflected in this development environment that I'm seeing locally, even if it's hosted far away. And so the part that DevSpace manages that mounting it to the container, and also it manages restarting that app process in the container once those changes are saved.
If you wanted to, you have to tell DevSpace to do it. So DevSpace won't do that out of the box. DevSpace won't even do the hot reloading out of the box. You do have to specify that you want that.
Fuel Snobbles here. Hello, Fuel Snobble.
Hey.
Fuel Snobbles. We're talking about another technology that helps you develop on Kubernetes. So this time it does it through the sexy hot loading.
Yes.
Hot reloading. Yeah. Putting the hot in the reloading. Cool.
Yeah. So, and then there's like the restart is like one thing, but you can do all kinds of stuff. For example, if you're using Node.js, you might have to do like an npm install to reinstall your dependencies because you did a change in the package JSON or something. Okay, this is very specific, but you have a change in your dependency file or in your package file, and then you have to reinstall the packages. So you can also define that in your DevSpace YAML, like, hey, if you see a change in package JSON, you have to rerun npm install. There's all kinds of stuff. I don't think you need to put that in there because there's a lot of different things. But again, the whole point is that all these tiny little things that you always need to do, you just put them there, and DevSpace will just do it for you, and you don't have to think about it anymore. So FuseNeighbor says, in .NET we have something like that, but since it works so, we call it lukewarm.
So I'm a developer. I have an application I want to develop. It's going to run in Google Cloud. So I have a DevSpace YAML, and I have a kubectl that authenticates me and points to the cluster that I want to run this on. So so when I'm developing in my IDE, I never run a kubectl command, right? All I do, I've set up the DevSpace and applied the DevSpace YAML, and I have my kubectl, and that's all.
Yeah.
And then
you don't run
all
a
I do
Docker
is
command.
change all I do is change, like hit save and nothing else.
Yeah.
I don't do any DevSpace CLI commands. I do nothing. I just hit save, and then
You run one DevSpace CLI command at the very beginning, right? You have your file, you get your coffee, you go in the morning, and then you run DevSpace dev, and then you just let that run for the rest of your day. And then you don't ever have to run kubectl, you don't ever have to run Docker build, whatever. That's all. DevSpace does all of that for you. But you do have to run the DevSpace command.
So Thindle's here too, yay. So you run a start command at the beginning of your development session. You run, it sounds like an end command at the end of your development session. And then
you can just stop the process, and then everything will still be there, I think. And then you can leave it there if you want to. If you're going to continue working there tomorrow, you don't maybe want to tear everything down. But you can also run a DevSpace delete or destroy or something like that, and that will take down all the things that DevSpace has spun up for you. So if you have a cluster that has stuff that DevSpace does not manage at all, DevSpace won't touch it. It won't just delete everything. It will only delete the stuff that you have defined in your YAML.
Okay, brilliant.
But again, you don't have to. If you close the DevSpace process and things are still on your cluster, they're just there. Nothing will happen to them. They're still there. They're still pods and services and whatever. It's just that DevSpace doesn't manage them anymore.
So the developer experience. DevSpace start at the beginning of setup. We'll say whatever setup happens, right? It's called DevSpace dev. You said, right? DevSpace.
Yes. You can run DevSpace dev for your local environment. You can run DevSpace deploy if you're on prod or on somewhere where you don't want to actively develop, and then you just run the deployments, which are not Kubernetes deployments.
I did not hear that because I was thinking about.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
No worries. I was just reinforcing the idea that what we call deployments in the DevSpace context are not necessarily Kubernetes deployments.
Yeah, that's important to
Yeah.
say many times over.
Yeah, maybe we should rethink that.
DevSpace dev command at the beginning of development. Then when
let me just check what the actual command name is before I tell you something wrong. I think it is DevSpace clean up. DevSpace cleanup. One word. No. Cleanup is one word, and that will delete everything.
So when app changes, so in this developer experience, DevSpace span at the beginning of development, when app changes are saved, the developer can see them live in the browser window, and they're right.
Yes.
And then that's that. When they want to commit their changes, they probably have a CI/CD process where they push it to Git, and then an image gets built and stuff like that happens. But
yes.
And that's that. It's really that easy. That's not
it is.
Yeah.
And there's even like a DevSpace CI, which I have to be honest, I haven't looked into that a lot, so I can't really talk about it right now. But so you can you see, you develop, you see everything seems to be fine. You didn't break Kubernetes or something, and and then you just commit and push it to your branch. Maybe just go directly from main. I don't know if you're doing that. And then so if you do that and someone else has your repository as dependency, then maybe their DevSpace YAML will now see, oh, there's a new version on my dependency repository. So now I'm going to pull that new version into Team B's cluster.
Yeah.
And then another thing that I think is really, really great about DevSpace is, and I touched on it, is that it makes like onboarding and collaboration a lot, I'm not going to say easier, but more structured maybe. So I said already that if you work on your thing and I work on my thing, I can get the newest version of your thing without having to like do a bunch of magic. Like DevSpace will just see like, oh, there's a new version, or there's already this version of the dependency lives on this cluster, so I'm just using this. There's also stuff that you can put in the DevSpace YAML, and now you already put a thing next to it, so you have to maybe point to it. There are pipelines, and these can be like your CI/CD pipelines. They don't have to be. It's just the concept of pipeline. You do one thing, then you do the next thing, then you do the next thing. That's the idea. So you can basically say, I have a pipeline that's named test, and to do a test, I need to do these three things, and then you can just like from your command line, you can just run DevSpace, run pipeline test or something. So you can do CI/CD stuff with DevSpace as well if you wanted to.
Testing is a great example. So if in this hot reloading experience, if you wanted to include a testing step before those code changes are live, is that where the testing step happens, or it's in like when you actually push changes?
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't necessarily put the testing thing in your development cycle, right?
Okay.
It's probably not.
It's just to slow you down too much. Yeah.
Yeah, you probably want to experiment a bit. I don't know how everyone develops, but for me, it's definitely I like to spike things and then implement properly with tests and everything. But I need like some space to just try things out.
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
The pipelines are mainly there. For example, let's say you have a pretty elaborate setup for tests. Like you have to run some things, and you have to like, I don't know, create some configs, whatever, just like a bunch of stuff, and then you can use one pipeline in another pipeline. So now you have a pipeline that's run integration tests, and then now you want another pipeline that's deploy, and then to deploy, you first want to run your tests. You first say build my images, deploy my stuff, run my tests, and then I don't know, push to Git or something.
Okay.
So it can be a CI/CD pipeline if that's what you want. It doesn't have to. It can also just be, whatever stuff you need in your local development environment. People have all kinds of special setups for themselves, and it's basically pretty much Bash. I don't think it's 100% Bash, but it looks like it. So if you need to, like do some special magic on your machine, you can do that in pipelines, and then you can reuse one pipeline in another pipeline.
Cool.
Just looking at what Russ is saying. All the automatic stuff that DevSpace does are done by default pipelines. Pipelines that you customize or override what DevSpace will do during DevSpace. Yeah. So you can, so DevSpace dev is like hard coded, but you can override it. You can, if you need, like, again, special stuff that the default behavior doesn't provide, you can just define that and then say, okay, I need to do this stuff, and then run the default dev pipeline, and then do other stuff maybe. So it's all customizable, but it doesn't have to be. If you're happy with the kind of default setups because you don't care, it's good enough. But if you have like really special like setup, then you can customize it. And again, this is super useful if you just want everyone in the team to have the same workflow, run the same kind of tests and everything. And then, I mean, there's so much stuff. I don't want to get into everything. Yeah. This is just the final thing.
Wait, I want to go backwards before you go forwards, please. There are some things I want to make sure I got correct. One thing I want to say quickly is this. There have been a few technologies like this where there's so much you can do, and it's very exciting. Yes. But the bottom line is like this developer experience and how simple it is. So like that's like the thing to remember when we're talking about all these little bells and whistles and
I'm just getting too carried away with all the
You're
stuff
excited.
That
you're passionate about your your technology, which is great. And so you were saying that you just briefly said one great thing about DevSpace is it enables well-defined collaboration between developers. Yeah. And I want to make sure I captured that well. If there's anything else you want to say there.
So, as I said, like one of the main, like to me, the most beautiful use case is that you just have this DevSpace YAML and you can give it to everyone. And it just, we all use the same DevSpace YAML, which means we all use the same workflow.
I see.
And there's also, this was the last thing I was going to say, there's also the possibility to create like a library. So you can create a DevSpace YAML where you just define, these pipelines that I mentioned, or you can even define custom functions if you want to. Right? This is how we run tests specifically. And then you can import them into your DevSpace YAML. So we can have a shared DevSpace library that's very, very specific to our use case. And then I can import that into my DevSpace YAML, and you can import that into your DevSpace YAML. And then if we want to change that for everyone, we just have to change that in that one place from where we import. So that's the I think those are the two ideas: is make it simple for developers to ignore Kubernetes or to not have to deal with it, but then also because we're now declaring and we're automating, we now have the possibility to converge. I'm thinking about a different word, but I don't consolidate. I think let's consolidate all like our little hacks and tricks into like a defined way of how we're going to do it, and we all pull from the same source. So that's the single source of truth.
So you can have a shared DevSpace library, and it can standardize your workflow. I love the source of truth.
Yes.
Probably if there are any like policies or best practices, you can incorporate 100%. Them here.
Yeah.
And then
you can use them. You don't have to. You can import them, and you can still override them, for yourself if that's what you want, but you don't have to. It's once again, we just try to really give people the possibility to do stuff when they want to, when they're really into it, and if they don't want to, then you don't have to.
I love it. That's how I want people to treat me all the time.
Exactly.
In life in general. I have this blank space. You started saying something right after hot load reloading, and I made you step back, and it had something to do with file systems, but I don't remember what it was.
I don't
It was
know.
a
I
ways
don't
back
know.
there. Okay, it's gone.
I don't know.
Okay, so
I
therefore,
don't think it was that important, honestly.
okay, it was okay. I wasn't sure. So then we have this little space. Do you have something new you want to fill it with, or we could possibly fill it up with benefits, or we can rethink our devs.
Let's do
Yeah.
benefits, I think. I think I
Okay.
talked in depth about all cool features, but in the end, you don't have to use any of them if you don't want to. And that I think
Yes.
that is the beauty of it, right?
You do you, boo. Yeah. Cool. So let's do a benefits section. I love benefits. So I choose a simple developer experience. Okay. And now it's your turn.
Quick onboarding.
Ooh. Lots of customization choices. I don't like that.
Yeah, it's not a benefit to you.
Quick onboarding. I like the standardized workflow.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. You think that's the best way to say that, or should we be a little more standardized? Yeah.
No, I think standardized. You can, if you really want to go all the way, you could say standardized workflow across teams.
Okay. Across teams. Love it. Oh yeah, the collaboration element's nice. Is that?
Yeah, you have it there.
Okay.
I will say fast dev cycle, because you get the feedback very quickly.
Love it. Yeah.
Oh, this is like a challenging game.
Yeah. I'm cheating and looking at the board. Oh,
obviously I'm doing that.
Is the same thing as hot reloading. That's just a mechanism
That's
behind it. Yeah.
Exactly. It just means that you get the feedback quickly, right? Changing something, does it work, does it not work?
How about this like declarative, just period, as a benefit?
I was thinking about that as well. Like declarative is nice.
Yeah. And definitely when we're talking about how it used to be, imperative was the big problem.
This is not a knock at all, but I used to work for a company named Tilt, and Tilt has a very, very similar product, which is called Tilt. It's not part of software. And Tilt does a very, very similar thing, but completely different, because Tilt doesn't declare with a YAML, but it's a starlar file, which is a Python dialect. So basically it's Python. And I think it's great in a lot of ways, because you can program everything. And that's really useful for developers. But what we noticed that some users just felt like they were hacking, because they didn't get like this nice YAML. They were used to YAMLs now, and YAMLs felt like clean and proper, but writing code to do things that was sometimes then imperative instead of declarative just felt kind of wrong and hacky. So that's why I do like YAMLs more. It just, I don't know, feels kind of right, and it's easier to explain to people. You don't have to learn Python to use DevSpace, right? It's just words and a bit
yeah. And is it even common for developers to write and manage their DevSpace YAML? It seems like that could be something that's set up by ops team for developers.
Could be. Yeah, could be. It depends on your organization and how you're doing it. Yeah, if you're doing DevOps, probably most of the time you are supposed to write your own DevSpace YAMLs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have anything?
I mean, you only write it once and then it's done.
Yes, that is set it and forget it. That could be the last benefit if you want. But it's your turn to do one. But there's only room for one more.
I'm going to say it's usable for all environments. You can use it for production as well.
Usable or good? Would it be good for production? Can I say good? It expresses an
You can say
opinion.
good. I'm not gonna say good. I'm not gonna say you can. Like obviously, if you understand what you're doing, if you have the proper security measures in
Usable.
place, like yeah,
Uh-huh.
it can be good. But I'm not gonna say it because it's just gonna get people to this idea that, oh yeah, let's just like DevSpace handle it. And like security is such a huge, like broad topic, especially with Kubernetes. There's like a billion million things that you need to think of, and like I just don't want people to get the impression that, oh, DevSpace was just going to handle everything. It can handle a lot of things for your local environment, but that's your local environment that has a lot of security measures done. Yes, Fuel Stable, it does work on Windows. I'm 99% sure it does. I'm just going to check. Yes, Windows PowerShell. Oh my god! I was just looking at the install command, and it's not nice, but it does work.
Set on the board. Good. Great. So I'm feeling a recap. Are you ready for me to recap this and make sure
Yes,
that we have a shared understanding, that you imparted everything you want to say? Okay.
I'm so glad we got there at the end.
It was a little touch and go there for me.
I know. It's like, what am I talking about? Why am I rambling?
So before DevSpace, way back in, what did you say, 2000? At the beginning of COVID.
That's a
2020. Yeah.
Oh, I said 2020.
Yeah. Devs, so to see a code change, when you want to develop on Kubernetes, it's a super duper pain in the butt because you have to rebuild and deploy a container every time your code changes to see what your code looks like. So that involves manual setup and changes, and it involves manual setup of your dependencies in your development environment. So you might have to, any other tools or other applications you're using, you manually deploy those to. Also, this was you painted a picture where there are like 25 steps to get your development environment set up correctly, which is of course an imperative thing when you're talking about doing steps to get somewhere. So then DevSpace was created and recently donated to the CNCF, right? DevSpace improves the developer experience by making Kubernetes invisible to the developer. That's what we came up with for a definition, and I like it. So as a developer, if you're here, Fuel Snob, I'm talking to you, I suppose, and Thindle, if you're still here. DevSpace, if DevSpace is doing its job well, you should not think about DevSpace. So you'll think about it to set up your DevSpace YAML, but that even can be shared. And then your developer experience is that when you're ready to develop your app on Kubernetes, you run the DevSpace dev command, and it will connect to or spin up your development environment. Well, the cluster already exists. It's not creating a cluster.
Yeah, the cluster is there. It will just find it.
Yes, connect to the cluster and then either connect to or spin up all the things you defined that you want to be around your application to help make it work. But all that's happening without you needing to worry about it. You just run that DevSpace dev command, and then you start developing. When you save changes to your app, you can open a browser window that's pointed to your app running in that Kubernetes cluster, and you immediately see those changes. You don't rebuild a container, and it's just that easy. As a developer, that's all you're thinking about. But all this other stuff that's happening and able to happen is pretty exciting. So if you want to get set up using DevSpace, you need a Kubernetes cluster that you're developing on. That could be local or remote. It could also be dev, prod, staging, whatever. You need a kubeconfig file, which developers might not know. Kubeconfig file points to a specific cluster and has authentication details for connecting to that cluster and like who you are as a user and other things. But that's basically what it does. And so you'll need the DevSpace CLI that runs locally just to run that DevSpace dev command. And that, of course, the application you're developing, and you can connect to out of cluster app dependencies, but that would be defined in your DevSpace YAML.
Yeah.
And then
I would probably remove that from to use DevSpace you need. Because you don't need that. It's just like you can do that, but it's not part of what you need.
Like this is not what you need.
Yeah. If that's a list of all the recs, then
yeah. Cool. So we got a little confused. So we ended up, part of why we were confused is because we were conflating two different use cases. So one use case we have is you have a local cluster, you want to develop your application them, there, and then you're spinning up local instances of all the dependencies that you want to use to do your development. So that's one use case. Another use case is where you might have a shared development cluster. It looks like it says Duster. Develop your app there, and your teammate is also developing their app there, and you depend on that app, and maybe that cluster has database or whatever else too. So the DevSpace is smart enough to see, oh, that dependency is already there, so therefore I'm not going to spin up another copy. And then DevSpace is also smart enough where you can say either, yes, I do always want to see the freshest copy of what my teammate is working on, or no, I want an older version of that so that it's stable. So that's our second use case. And one of the benefits of DevSpace is that it enables these well-defined interactions between developers. Like you're saying up front in a declarative way how you want to interact with your teammates' application, which is you're not figuring it out on the fly or like calling up like, hey Susie, did you push your changes lately? So this DevSpace YAML is at the center of it all. It's defining everything. So you could have a shared DevSpace library with lots of different DevSpace YAMLs. A whole team can be working off of the same DevSpace YAML. There are a lot of different strategies for how you want to use it. But basically, the DevSpace YAML is the declarative way of how you're defining your entire development environments on Kubernetes. So you're declaring your applications. There could be multiple. Those are also called deployments in DevSpace, which are not the same thing as a Kubernetes deployment. You can choose your container image strategy, whether you're pointing at code and the image gets built, or whether you're pointing at images, or have your apps wrapped in a Helm chart or vanilla Kubernetes manifest, but you're defining them here. You also are, if you need to, declaring any dependencies of your application here, so those get deployed, or DevSpace is at least watching that they're there. And then there are lots of other bells and whistles. Like you can say, if it's a dev environment, I want this to happen. If it's a prod environment, I want this to happen. So it's all defined in the same DevSpace YAML. And if it is a dev environment, there are lots of bells and whistles you could add, like port forwarding, or making it easy to SSH into containers, or the sexy hot reloading. And so the hot reloading is what enables this developer experience of being able to just save locally, like through your own IDE, and then immediately see that change in a browser, even though it's all happening on Kubernetes. And that happens because the file, it's also called file sync in the docs. You can't find it, so be careful. The app source code gets mounted directly into the container. So when you save the changes, it's automatically reflected in the development environment. And then DevSpace can optionally manage like restarting the process if you wanted to, or what was the example you gave of?
So either if you
like
need to restart the process,
or your dependencies change,
if your packages change or something.
Rerun npm start or whatever.
Just really be careful with the word dependencies, because it's not what we talked about earlier as dependencies.
Right. Yes. Oh.
Engineers really need to come up with better names for things.
Yeah, exactly. So, yes. So how would you even distinguish those two types of dependencies?
I call them packages because that's more. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So we can manage your packages. I love that. Thank you. So, or restart or whatever. So it can do those things automatically. So again, developer experience, you're not even thinking about that stuff. You're just making changes. You're seeing the changes. Bam, bam, bam. So you can also define and implement a CI/CD pipeline with the DevSpace YAML. So we talked about, like, in DevSpace, you've made all your changes. You can see them. And then when you're ready to actually implement those changes for them to really be what the end user sees, how you can just start that process within your DevSpace YAML, or maybe you have a GitOps process and you just push to Git, or you do whatever your company's process is. But it can be a thing that's integrated into DevSpace if you want it to be. But you did say it's mostly Bash scripts if it's that case, yes?
It looks like Bash. I don't even know if it's actual real Bash, but it looks like Bash. So even if you're on Windows, you would write it in your DevSpace YAML as Bash.
Yeah.
Don't ask me how it's ported. I don't know.
Yes, yes. Fieldstabble says naming 101. Reuse terms for different things. Come up with new
Yes.
terms for the same thing.
100%. Especially like make it so that it's really controversial also. So people will have like
Yeah.
Twitter feuds over it, and maybe you can like create an entire industry just on like hating on
Serverless?
things.
I'm thinking of serverless. What are you thinking about when
Oh,
you say
I'm
that?
thinking of DevOps is dead, honestly.
Oh, okay. Excellent. So then Leanne and I came up with our own benefits. We took turns. So one benefit is a simple developer experience. Another benefit is quick onboarding. We have standardized workflow across teams, so like enabling great collaboration. You have a fast development cycle, a fast feedback loop. The whole thing is declarative. And then it's usable for all environments. So that means local and remote, but that also means like dev, prod, staging, those sorts of
Yes.
environments.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Because environments here means more than one thing also.
Again, yeah, of course. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's cool if you want to use it in production, but I think the real value really is for development, because that's where the stuff is most annoying, I think. So that's, use it for prod if you want to, but mainly use it for dev.
I mean, dev's in the name. It's in the name.
It is. It kind of is. Yeah, for sure. It's not prod space, for sure.
Exactly. This has been an absolute blast. We have another
so much
comment.
Fun.
Hydrate in a relationship to software. I'm unfamiliar of the term hydrate in relationship to software. That's fascinating.
Oh, yeah, I know. In front-end development, there's something called hydration, and it has to do with like, do you render stuff like client side or server side? I don't know. It's such a new term. I don't know. I used to be a front-end developer maybe 7 years ago, and it's just been so hard to keep up with it. It's impossible, really. But I think that's the one thing where I know hydrate from. Let me know if this is what you mean, and then maybe you can explain it to me also, because I always learn it and then I immediately forget it like a week later.
Yeah, let's see how fast Fieldstabble can type, because it's about dancing time.
Okay.
You
can find me on Twitter. You can explain it. You can shout to me on Twitter about that.
Teach us about hydration, please, Fieldstabble.
Yes.
And if you see me at KubeCon, give me a hug.
Yes.
Oh, that's exactly Fieldstable's whole point. Is like, I don't know. People keep saying it, and it's just like, let's just.
I'm the next level. I kind of think I know what it's about, but I don't actually. So.
Yeah. Well, what you could do is then speak about it confidently and just say what you think it is, and that's how it can come to have a ton of different meanings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a good idea.
That's a great idea. All right, let's dance it out. So I'm gonna just play the start music at the end, Leanne, and we're just gonna dance our goodbyes.
I'm gonna do like the best like white person dance.
Oh, nice. I'm all black, so you can't actually see my arms.
Yeah.
So my dancing or my hips either. So normally I'm like a hip person, but here it's all about just like hand movement.
I love how you wave the arm thing. It's really.
All right, here we go. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye.